Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. I just finished Abyss of Legends Path 4, and this is my revive sheet for what it cost me, who I used, etc, etc. This time around, I went into Path 4 with Corvus, Doom, Torch, Magneto, and Aegon. Now, you don't need Corvus and Aegon. You can use Aegon for MCOC. I wasn't confident. And I wanted to have Corvus, and I'm glad I brought him, even though I failed to get the charges. I liked using Corvus on MCOC a lot, and I'm not particularly looking forward to using Aegon. Maybe Aegon will be easier for me, but because of the amount of times you use Aegon for Path 4, I was really grateful for Corvus. I didn't have to think about the combo. I was able to build up to 999, no problem. So for the first fight, Darkhawk, I used Aegon. Now, you can use Magneto or Torch to essentially solo Darkhawk very easily using the Despair Mastery. I opted to ramp up Aegon just because, again, you know, acknowledging my skill level, it was better for me to grab that early combo because it made Luke Cage a lot more bearable. You can see here it took me 18 revives this time around, whereas the last time I went against Luke Cage, full boosting the whole way, it took me 28. So yes, I spent an additional 8 revives on Darkhawk this time around, but I actually come out 2 revives ahead because of the significant reduction in revives on Luke Cage, and I wasn't boosting nearly as heavily for these 2 fights, so I saved a lot of resources that way. Next up is the Killmonger, who I was intending to bring and use Magneto, but I actually had a lot more value utilizing Corvus. I did grab 2 charges from Darkhawk, and that's just because Corvus was a lot easier to play. I think Magneto is, strictly speaking, the better option here. You can get a lot more damage off per revive, but Corvus is just way easier to play. So I ended up using Corvus, even though it cost me more. Next up for Gulk, I used Torch, and then, reverse healing to get him down. And it was that very last bit that was brutal, just absolutely brutal. Ended up using Aegon to get him down while through the heal block phase, and I butchered it and did not get the Corvus Glaive charge here for the Avenger. Very unfortunate. I would recommend coming in here with like an idea of who you want to use for that last 25%. Torch is not a very good option at that point in the fight. And you know, Aegon works if you're using L2s for the bleeds, but you're really only getting damage from the bleeds, and it makes for a pretty nasty time. Magneto can do it as well, but again, you know, you really want to think about it. This is why people normally bring Nick Fury. I hadn't even considered that in my planning stage. For Yellow Jacket, I ended up using Magneto and Aegon. I pretty much just switched off whatever worked for me at the time. Both of them did okay. I got pretty good value out of each for 12 revives. Aegon definitely did a lot more, but that's just because I'm more comfortable utilizing Aegon's playstyle rather than Magneto's very heavy one-hit playstyle. It's much harder for me to manage. For Mordo, I used 10 revives. That's just because Mordo's, you know, a pain in the A. They were very stingy, and I died a lot to SP3s. For Mephisto, I used 0. I did get the one-shot. That was very nice with my pre-fight ability. For Ghost Rider, I used 3 revives. It is worth noting that even though Ghost Rider got that Incinerate Immune buff or update, he is not Incinerate Immune in the Abyss. So Torch is still a very viable option here. And honestly, even if he was Incinerate Immune, my plan was to just use SP3s for the damage phase and then really rely on the pre-fight ability recharging in order for me to take this Ghost Rider down. Thankfully, I did it, but I did get like 40% off the pre-fight revive compared to like the 30 or 25%-ish on the non-pre-fight fights. So really worth noting. For Korg, I used Doom, 5 revives. That was solid. The Hood, I used Aegon, 10 revives. Could have been worse. This fight is a little challenging. You really need to time your combo to the poison and bleed popping up, so you shrug them right away. Kind of hard. After doing this fight, I really understand why a lot of people used Ghost. I can definitely see that being a lot easier here, but Aegon does do pretty good there. For MODOK, I used Magneto, Aegon. I pretty much just alternated. Magneto does really well here if you're good at dexing the L1, but Aegon does really well here if, you know, you are just willing to take the damage and drop an L2 or time your stuns. Now, I will note that if you're going to use Magneto, you do ideally want to drop an L2 and then keep that armor break up consistently, because that armor break is going to prevent you from getting stunned from the power sting. You just take the first like 2 or 3 power stings with Magneto. It's going to bring you down to like 29% health or so, and then you keep on going and you push for L3s from there, and then it's not as big of a deal. but the power stings will stun you even as Magneto because of the increased ability accuracy reduction. So get that armor break on, keep it up pretty much permanently, and, you know, dex the L1s properly. Aegon worked better for me because my Aegon was pretty ramped up at this point. I think he was like 700 hits or so. So I didn't have to worry too much about auto block. A lot of times, like, AAR helped me get through it, so Aegon worked a lot better for me. But, you know, hopefully Mags works for you. I do think you can get the one-shot with Mags. For Morningstar, I used Torch. This was 3 revives, just a matter of kind of, you know, pushing my way through the fight. Darkhawk, I used Magneto and Aegon, but I used team revives here because I did have Doom, I did have Torch. I had a lot of really good options here. The reason I didn't just use Mags, or I didn't just use Torch, is because I only had 1 point in despair at the time, and I was too lazy to change it. Because honestly, just with team revives, I hit really, really good efficiency on this Darkhawk, and I was able to take him down without having to change my masteries, and I do think I saved resources that way. For Red Skull, I ended up using Doom / Mags, mostly just team revives again. I had a lot of better luck with Doom this time around. He wasn't so great for me last time, but this time he did work a lot better, and the team revives, again, were very, very efficient. It's nice when you have multiple people on your team who can deal damage to Red Skull, so you can just chip away at him and feel good. Bishop took me 1 revive. I completely botched the first fight, but I got it down the second time, no problem. Missed the Corvus Glaive Charge, unfortunately. Sim Supreme, I used Torch. Now, the Sim Supreme, you got to be really, really, really careful to make sure you don't trigger Dexterity against, like, the L2 or the L1 when he's in his first phase. You know, and he does cycle through the phase, and the L1 changes the phase. It's called, not Set's Fang, it's like Shadow's Cunning or something. But anyways, you want to make sure you really, really get good at, like, recognizing that phase, because if you trigger Dex, it's like 20% of your health. It's absolutely brutal. But as long as you don't do that, you just parry when that happens, you can get a lot of really good damage with Torch on this Sim Supreme, and it's just a matter of bursting him down, not a big deal. Overall, not the worst fight, but do be careful. I lost so much health to staggered Dexes. Bad times. But the block damage from the L2 is, like, really massive, and given, you know, the fact that it's only a third of the time that you can't trigger Dex, I don't think Dexterity is worth turning off, just, you know, so that you can avoid and properly avoid the L2. That's my opinion, but there's a lot to be said for the staggers being part of Sim Supreme's power gain, and it might be easier to just turn Dex off. I'll leave that to everybody else. This is just the way I went about it. For Masacre, I used mostly Corvus. I did try Aegon just for giggles. It wasn't a very good time, but I used pretty much only Corvus. And that fight was fun for, like, the first 3 fights. A lot of this 15 revives, I'd say like 8 or 9 of those is me just doing no damage. Like, when you have a really good run, you get a lot of damage on Masacre. When you have a bad run, you get 0 damage. That's very, very tough. Just try to stay in good moods. And just remember that it's all about just having a couple good fights. Push your way through. For Omega Red, I used Aegon. This cost me 6 revives, mostly because I was goofing around. Hyperion cost me 3, which is really, really good. This is the cheapest I've done the Hyperion fight so far. And I was doing a different method. I gotta say, I really, really think just maintaining L3s and not even bothering with Incinerates is probably the way to go for Hyperion if you're using Doom. And the reason for that is, 1, I think it's more damage. I really do. The L3 from Doom with Double Furies always gets you, like, that full max damage quantity. The smacks for the Double Furies hit for a ton of damage. All of your hits are constantly maxing out, but the biggest thing is the fact that it allows you to do an adjusted rotation. The adjusted rotation, when you're only going for L3s, is you come out of the L3, they're passive stun. You go medium, medium, light, 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 medium, heavy charge. And what this does is if they evade anywhere in your combo, they are not at an L3. Hyperion is not at an L3. Because if you go light, 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 medium, medium, and you try to, like, throw your L1, he's at 3 SP3s. He's at 3 bars. And if he evades your L1, pretty much dead. He goes L1, evade, SP3, you're dead. And that's happened to me so many times. I know it's like, oh, well, he won't do it. I'm telling you, it has happened to me so many times. Every single time I fight this Hyperion, it's happened to me, I think, twice. It's just absolutely infuriating. But when you go medium, medium, light, 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 medium SP1, even if he evades the SP1, he is at like 2 and almost a third bar, and then you can just hold block, wait for him to dash into you, and then hit him and do your standard, you know, power siphoning build up to your L3 like normal. It works amazing. I will make the qualifying statement that your Doom does need to be awakened for this to work properly, but you know, shoring up and accounting for evade is really, really good, and it completely changes the way the fight feels, and it takes away that L3 frustration. So that's really, really how I'm advocating taking Hyperion down for the future. For the second to last Killmonger, I used Mags / Corvus Glaive. I forgot there's actually one more fight here. There's a Karnak. I used Max. I used pretty much only Corvus Glaive, and I did actually find that I tried using the Corvus Glaive parry light method to get as many L2s off, and just Corvus Glaive. I tried to get 2 L2s in the first set, wait for my Glaive charges to come back up, and then pummel again and try to get 2 more L2s. That was the most damage I was getting. Doing that and just properly using my charges to get the damage in on a 40% revive, especially with like me making mistakes or taking regular block hits instead of parries, that's where I got the most damage. So I really encourage that. I think if I did that the whole time, I could have chalked this down to like 4 or 5 revives, which might not be the most efficient with Corvus, but given the fact that I only had 2 charges, I would say it was pretty good. For this Karnak, I used Aegon. I didn't know he was in the path. I thought he wasn't, and I think it took me 6 revives. So this is actually 207 times 40, brings me out to a total of 207 revive for a total of 8,280 units, not including the like 10 or so healing potions I bought. So about 8,500 units for this 4th path, which is not good. It is not good, but I didn't have a whole lot of 30% boosts. I didn't use a whole lot of my like half hour, 40-minute boosts because I'm trying to save them for the last path. And honestly, this is the hardest path. By far. So if I can do it for 8,500, I'm sure you can. That said, hopefully this helps some of you out. Hopefully you learn from my mistakes, because I definitely feel like I made mistakes. Definitely feel like I made mistakes. But as always, I will talk to you all later, and I'll see you for Path 5. Peace.